Okay, so we're going to go ahead and state the domain of a function. And the function that we are going to look at is a radical, and we're going to compare this to what would happen if it was a parabola. Okay, and that is 25. So this is actually taken, it's number 1 in the quick check worksheet. So I wanted to create a video so you guys can see a walkthrough of this. So the domain of a radical function, we can't have negatives, right? Because then we're dealing with an imaginary number. So I know what has to be on the inside has to be greater than or equal to 0. So I use this idea to understand what my domain is. And I think about just the inside, and this is what we talked about in class, is that if I look at this parabola, no matter where the zeros are, I have a general idea, but we can find the zeros first, but I know this is a parabola that opens up. And so because if I look at this general picture of a parabola and think about this shape, only the pieces that are above the x-axis are going to fit my domain. So what that means is if I find these zeros, I know where my domain starts. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rewrite our equation. So I have f of x is equal to the square root of 4x squared minus 25. Oops, let me go ahead and erase that real quick. And I want to get this graph back over here. So there's that graph. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to set 4x squared minus 25 equal to 0. And I'm going to solve. So 4x squared is equal to 25. Divide by 4. And then I have x squared is equal to 25 over 4. So I take the square root of both sides. And then we get x is equal to plus or minus 5 over 2. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of 4 is 2. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and graph it. We know that these are the zeros. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw a very generic graph. And I'm going to plot my 5 halves and my negative 5 halves. Okay? And then I know that the zeros, I'm going to mark those. And we know that the radical function is going to start at these 2 spots. And I'm going to go ahead and just mimic that parent graph that we've already talked about, that general shape. And just trying to get a little room here. And we're going to go ahead and graph this other side. And we're going to be pointing all the way to the left. Okay, so now let's go ahead and state our domain, and we're going to look at our graph to help us with the domain. So when we look at this, we're going to see that we have a domain that's pointing this direction and this direction. So as you see here, we have x is greater than the 5 halves, or x is less than the negative 5 halves, because that's the direction that the arrow is pointing. We have a greater than and a less than. And you'll also notice here the comparison, as you can see with this and this, and this and this, the left side and the right side of the graph. You see this comparison of, hey, isn't this the same direction that this part of the parabola is pointing in? Same direction that this one's pointing in. So if we know the general shape of the parabola, we find the zeros and we know we're going to be pointing to the right and pointing to the left. And notice that's how we get our inequalities.